John Kerry will visit 9 cities in 11 days as he sets to strengthen American positions amidst a world in conflict.
Early indications are that he has a tough road ahead. 2 days of talks with Iran on its nuclear program ended today without any real breakthrough. And the bloodshed in Syria continues unabated, with the UN Security Council members still at an impasse.
Well, here to talk us through some of the major challenges facing U.S. foreign policy is Dr. Theodore Karasik, the Director of Research and Consultancy at INEGMA. Thanks for joining us. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
So certainly quite an important visit for John Kerry. So we just mentioned some major issues to look at. Everything, you know, from trying to support the rebels in Syria, trying to avert a crisis in Iran, and then, of course, eventually a practical peace solution between Palestine and Israel. But first visit out here, what do you feel he'll be looking to achieve?
Well, this is being called his listening tour, and that's very important because he is getting introduced to this situation on the ground that Hillary Clinton had for the past 4 years. I think that's a very serious handoff of very key issues with a region in crisis that now Secretary of State Kerry needs to understand very clearly, and that's why he's making a tour of all the different capitals within this time period.
I guess looking at Syria to start things off, a very tricky situation there. It would seem that the U.S. Would very much like to become more involved in the conflict there in terms of weakening Iran, weakening the relationship with the Assad regime, and obviously encouraging him to step down. At the same time, though, the rebels have been reported to have links to Al-Qaeda. So the question is, how much do you support them? How do you strike that tricky balance, I suppose?
The point here is that the U.S. and its allies in the region regarding Syria have to be able to come up with a plan that funnels aid directly to the forces that are not linked to Al-Qaeda. Now, that's very difficult to do, first of all, because you can't identify everyone exactly. It's not like they're carrying a little card. On the other hand, or in addition rather, you have to be able to make sure that the allies that you're working with aren't at cross purposes, and there are other countries within this anti-Assad alliance that have to be part of the process. And that's important, particularly when you're dealing with a country like Russia, who now accepts the idea that Assad may have to go, but they also are going to have a word to say about it too.
So how exactly does he do this? Is it about increasing communication, building those ties?
I think it's going to be played out a lot more when Kerry meets with the Syrian opposition coalition, and that might be able to give us a hint about what is ongoing. Unfortunately, the Syrian opposition is in disarray. They're not on the same page, and this needs to be rectified before a real push towards helping the rebels succeed in Syria and ultimately have a new state form.
Absolutely. I think we see fresh pictures come in every day from Syria. It just gets more shocking. I want to move on a little bit and talk more about Iran. As we mentioned earlier, we've seen world leaders meet, a couple of days of talks, really no big solutions. Hardly surprising, I guess, for a couple of days versus a decade.
Well, the P5+1 talks have always, this is the third one. It was relatively unsuccessful, except for the fact that there will be technical talks being held within about a month and then another round of meetings. I think what this is a situation that either side is not willing to capitulate to the other, and it's going to continue to be in that form for a while. Having said that, I think the next question is, well, the West has threatened military action against Iran. I think now that this is going to be unlikely in the coming months. First of all, because there are more talks scheduled, so you're not going to have any kind of action. And second of all, the political will, as well as the financial capability of the West to launch any kind of strike against Iran is simply not there. So I think this is going to drag on.
That's the thing. I mean, to me, it seems like I guess having a U.S. military attack is far worse than potentially having a nuclear-powered Iran.
This has been an ongoing debate for a number of years, whether you want to have a neighbor who has a nuclear capability versus a neighbor that you've made very angry with a full-fledged military strike and how they're going to lash back. There are many people who think that avoiding the military confrontation and trying to get Iran into the member of the international community is an important point, yet one day there will be a Persian nuclear weapon, and that's going to set off another round of arms proliferation, particularly in the nuclear arena throughout the MENA region.
Absolutely. One thing I think is, looking at, I guess, John Kerry's trip this time around, he's not making his way to Israel, but he will be joining President Obama there in a few weeks' time. Considering the, I guess, relatively cool relations between the two nations at the moment, what are you expected to come out of this trip?
On that issue, I think that the Israeli-Palestinian issue has really dropped off to the side. No longer is it a primary issue. Even in the newscasts, you really don't see the Palestinian issue being put forward as much as you used to before the Arab Spring. It's unfortunate because there is a lot of activity ongoing in regards to this issue, but I think that addressing this type of issue won't occur until he accompanies President Obama to Israel.
What's your sense on how cool the relations are? I mean, there's been a lot of speculations that the relationship has continued to cool, and it's not at its best point necessarily. What's your take on that?
My take is that there's been a lot of tension because of election processes in both countries, and each country is trying to figure out its position on a number of different issues in the Middle East. Where they do agree, I think, is on Syria, that this is a very serious problem, and that's equal to the Iranian nuclear threat. So there is some areas where they agree, but they completely disagree in anything else outside of those two.
And what will it take to, I guess, put the peace process, the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, back at the top of the agenda? I mean, as you mentioned, it has dropped off since the Arab Spring, but it is central to really establishing that trust in the West here in the Middle East. What do you think it will take to really push it back up?
I think it's about the West getting more focused on the Israeli-Palestinian issue and a two-state solution. It seems to be moving in that direction on the Palestinian side, but there's still some disagreement about that. And also making sure that other powers in the region are able to push this process forward. I think the Qatari Emir's visit to Gaza was significant, and perhaps there could be a Gulf Arab solution to this problem that would help the U.S. and Israel come to some kind of agreement with the Palestinians.
Absolutely. Well, definitely something that we hope to see going forward. Dr. Karasik, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.